Good afternoon. Welcome to Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Full Council meeting on the 24th of February 2021.
Mr. Mayor, can I just interrupt you for a second, because I think that's a mistake on the edit you've been given, because it's actually the 21st of April. I think some figures have been...
Oh yes, it is true. Yeah. Sorry, apologies. Not been a good start to the meeting. Please note that this meeting has been recorded, may be broadcast via the authority internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. I'll go on to open the meeting now, and I'll go on to item number 1, which is apologies for absence.
Mr. Mayor, we have had an apology from Councillor Jeremy Davis.
Okay. We'll go on to item number 2, declarations of interest. Members, please note A and B while declaring the interest.
Councillor Gareth Lewis, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Agenda item 6, a loan information report. I think it's prudent to declare a personal and prejudicial interest as I own a property in the subject street.
Okay.
And that seems to be all of the declarations, Mr. Mayor.
Right, okay. We'll go on to minutes of the meeting. Item number 3, which is items 3A. Oh, they join in, are they? Items 3A to 3E. Can you move over for this, please?
Could we just ask all colleagues to mute their mics if they're not talking, Mr. Mayor? Is that okay?
Certainly.
Mr. Mayor, I move agenda item 3 to 3A to 3E.
Thank you very much, Leader. Do we have a seconder for that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to second the recommendations.
Can I ask the Monitoring Officer to take us through the vote, please?
Yes, and just for on this occasion, members, I won't go through abstentions or against, and I'll just ask you straight away if you can record your vote if you are in favour of that recommendation.
Sign in approved. There we are. Let's read the next one there. It will be now. Oh, yes, read the next.
That is, yeah, that's complete and that's carried, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Caris. We'll go on to item number 4, the Audit Wales report, assessment of progress to address key concerns. I'll hand over to the leader, Councillor Mitten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, I'm going to take you through a summary of the report and then, of course, the recommendations, which will then be seconded by one of my Cabinet colleagues. But I will then invite our colleagues from Welsh Audit Office to present the formality of the recommendations to us before we go into questions and debate, if that's okay. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regards to a summary of the report at 1.1, in May 2019, Audit Wales issued a letter to Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council outlining 4 concerns at the time. They were namely our financial situation, our service pressures, leadership and capacity, and governance. Following setting a balanced budget for 2019-2020, this council took a proactive step and asked Welsh Government to support us in these challenging times. An Improvement and Assurance Board was appointed to carry out a rapid assessment exercise, and in response we have developed, of course, a recovery, transformation and improvement plan. Following issuing the letter at 1.3 to Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council in May 2019, Audit Wales developed a Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council assessment of progress to address key concerns. That report was back in March 2021, see Appendix 1, and this report contains 10 recommendations, which I will invite Sarah to discuss in a second. At 1.4, following Council receiving the Audit Wales presentation of their findings and recommendations, officers and elected members of the Council will develop a response that will be presented to this Council meeting in May 2021. Therefore, Mr Mayor, I will go to the recommendations, and they are at 2.1, that the findings and recommendations in the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council assessment of progress to address key concerns are noted and debated. And I'll just very quickly come back after it's been seconded to invite our colleagues from Audit Wales in. And so therefore I move that recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Can I second that, Mr Mayor? And in doing so, just like to make a comment on and bring some perspective, I think, to the Wales Audit Report. As the leader points out, May 2019, 4 concerns: finance, service pressures, leadership capacity and governance. And whilst in principle it's difficult to disagree with much of the report, I think some context of our own is justified. From a historical perspective, I've looked back over the finance over the last 16 years, and there have only ever been 3 deficits declared. Interestingly, all 3 are directly attributable to the unpredictability of the social services budget. Over the past 6 years, 3 of those years, we've declared surpluses of circa 3 million plus, and in 2015-16, a surplus of 4.1 million may have been out of kilter with the surrounding financial years. However, analysis of that 4.1 million will show you a quiet year for social services, returning surpluses that led to an overall surplus for that year. 2019-20 returned 2.891 million as a surplus, and in a year that was predicted by the 2016-17 medium-term financial plan to be a £20 million deficit year. And this financial year, we will outturn circa 3 million again. So by June, and the revenue outturn for our finances, we can safely say that the finances have been in the best order for the past 16 years, showing sustainable 2 years of 3 million, circa 3 million surplus. In comparative terms, Pan Wales perspective would show us that figures from their own authorities published in their medium-term financial plans will show us authorities, for example, similar to ours, Bridgend, for example, never fall below a deficit over the next 3 years of 5.5 million. Blaenau Gwent have an increasing deficit from 2.4 million next year to 6.4 million in the next 3 years. And Cardiff, over the next 3 years, never fall below a £20 million deficit for the next 3 years. So in comparative terms, not all doom and gloom for us. The difference for us now, we've got a more robust approach to our business, and in particular within social services, where the work of Chris Davis and Councillor Hughes before him complement both Lisa Curtis Jones and now Tarring in their understanding of the demand profiles predominantly of their business and the links to accountancy, improving their budget performance. Couple this with the ongoing reviews of fleet management, where that was costing us 1.65 million a year for just over 100 vehicles. Asset and estate management, where we have around 270 million pounds invested. Decarbonisation and those theoretical potential savings being realised and now linked to the medium-term financial plan. Introduction of focus on my performance. We invest nearly £40 million a year, as discussed previously in council meetings, in human resource. And now we monitor that to assess a return on that investment. And now we're developing our performance dashboard to monitor all our performance across the authority. When we came to administration in 2017, we inherited the £20 million deficit, social services budgets out of control, no individual performance monitoring to speak of, organisational performance monitoring ineffective for our business needs. So, of course, there were questions of our sustainability and our finances. Service pressures, they'll always be there. Leadership and capacity, Kevin O'Neill has taken the lion's share of driving this organisation forward. With Lisa being handed the baton, we continue to improve. We have invested 750,000 in improving capacity to date, and that journey continues. And governance, I'm sure even internal audit will be bringing a positive opinion this year. And I think you'll agree the authority is on a journey of improvement. We're not at our aspired destination, and that never will be the position. That's the nature of aspiration. But improvement, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, if I may invite our colleagues, I believe Sarah is going to talk in relation to the recommendations, but just to give a warm welcome to Sarah Jane Byrne, to Helen Goddard and to Ian Phillips. Sarah, if I can hand over to you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, good evening. I don't know if you can see me. I think so, yes. My name's Sarah Jane Byrne. I'm from Audit Wales. I'm the Performance Audit Manager that works with the Council, and I've been involved in writing this report. Before I sort of give a brief overview of the findings and go into some of the recommendations, we just wanted to say thank you to those members, officers and stakeholders who gave their time to help to do the review, particularly during such a challenging time. This has been hugely appreciated, and it's made the review run really smoothly, so thank you. Obviously, the report provides an assessment of the Council's progress to address the concerns that we'd raised previously, as Elisa mentioned. And I think it's important to highlight that this is set against a backdrop of a really challenging year, both with the Storm Dennis, and the pandemic, which is obviously ongoing. You'll see in the report our conclusion, which is that the Council has shown resilience in its response to recent challenges. We felt it was important to recognise that. It has made progress in developing its improvement plan, but it urgently needs to address its lack of capacity to drive the transformation needed and use its resources to strengthen its resilience over the medium to long term. So obviously the report is set out, there's a summary and then there's two main sections, and we've made 10 recommendations, which the Council is required to formally consider and respond to. Today is part of that, and then I understand it's going to continue those conversations over the next month before coming back to full Council in May. I'm assuming members have read the report, but I just wanted to highlight a few areas really. So in terms of areas of progress, as I said, we felt it's important to recognise the resilience the Council showed in dealing with the pandemic. Both Eston and CIW have identified some strengths in the Council's response. All along, the Council has engaged constructively with the Improvement Assurance Board. And as Councillor Barry mentioned, one of the concerns that we raised originally was around the Council's financial position, and it's good to see that that short-term financial position is much improved. And we understand the position has improved further since we actually wrote this report. We've also found that relationships between senior officers and Cabinet are improved, and we heard the word trust being talked about, which is great. And it's important to stress that, as we do in the report, that we didn't do a comprehensive review of all services, but we don't consider services to be at immediate risk of failure. And it's important, we wanted to make that point in the report. In terms of education, it's also been positive that we've seen some early signs of progress with the setting up of the partnership panel and the development of the RAR strategy. In terms of the challenges remaining, whilst we recognise that you've got your plan, on obviously aspects of the implementation of that plan have been affected by the pandemic, it's obviously vital that the Council maintains the momentum in terms of implementing that plan and continuing to refine it. In terms of governance arrangements, we feel that these really need to be focused on the priority business and they need to act in a complementary way. Relationships between members need to continue to be strengthened, and all members need to work together and fulfil their roles. And we feel this is pivotal to that transformation that the Council needs. We've said before that that collective member ownership is needed. We talk about in the report, and we recognise some of the steps the Council's taken to improve its scrutiny arrangements. And again, some of those have been hampered by the pandemic, but for us, we do feel scrutiny remains an area for improvement. And in terms of leadership, the pandemic has shown that senior members and officers can work together well, and they need to build on this. We've heard the Council leadership talk constructively about aspirations for the future, but it's now about putting all of that into action and focusing beyond the 1 year. Obviously, we feel that the Council needs to address its lack of capacity and expertise to drive the transformation, and there's a need for permanent senior management arrangements, and we make some specific recommendations about these. And whilst we feel the short-term financial position has improved, and Councillor Barry's talked about that in the report, and it's important to emphasise that this improved financial position gives the Council a window of opportunity to plan for the medium to long term, and that includes identifying the resources it needs to actually implement that plan, including the level of investment and also to consider the savings that it can realistically achieve. This is about strengthening its financial resilience and sustainability. And as we said in the report, we don't think this is an indefinite window of opportunity. The council cannot continue to rely and assume that there'll be positive financial settlements. Obviously, in terms of education, we recognise the early signs of progress, which have been positive, but we do feel that further work is still needed. Obviously, we recognise that in the absence of national measures, it's been quite tricky to kind of monitor and track progress, and we know the council is looking to address this. But it's key that the council continues to work constructively with the consortium, the education consortium, to ensure that the arrangements it has in place to assure itself that it's got value for money from the education consortium. And in terms of performance management, Councillor Barry touched on some of these developments. Yes, arrangements have been strengthened, but we're not yet seeing the impact of some of those arrangements. And it's really about using them effectively to make sure they inform decision making and to ensure that there's a stronger kind of performance management culture overall. Finally, partnership working. I think through the pandemic, we've seen some really good signs of partnership working. And again, it's about building on that and ensuring that the council's getting the most from those arrangements. So overall, we feel it's a balanced position. We feel the council has made some progress to address the concerns that we raised previously, but areas of improvement remain, and particularly to help strengthen the resilience over the medium term and sustain improvement. And in terms of the recommendations, you'll see we've made 10 recommendations, and they cover many of the areas that we've highlighted in that second section of the report. So there's a recommendation about addressing the lack of capacity and expertise. There's one about needing to have a permanency in senior management. The council started fairly early its capacity review, and it needs to continue to do that. Obviously, we recognise it's made as a provision in its 21-22 budget as well. It needs to continue to refine that improvement plan and ensure it's fully costed. And also, we think it's important that the council continues to engage and strengthen its communication with its staff. It's really important it brings them along with it. Recommendation 6 is very much about the financial position, building on that short-term financial position that you've got at the moment, to look at the medium to long term, think about the savings that can realistically be achieved and the level of investment needed to deliver the RTI plan. In terms of education, this is about the whole corporate body, the whole council taking ownership and remaining focused on improving education outcomes for children and young people. And recommendation 8 then is around strengthening performance management arrangements at all levels. And 9 is around strengthening scrutiny arrangements, particularly about thinking about how the scrutiny arrangements can hold the executive to account. And also we feel it could have a really key role in terms of maintaining momentum around the delivery of the RTI plan. And then finally, we make a recommendation about partnership working and about making sure it's got arrangements in place so it can assure itself that those arrangements are providing value for money. I think I'll stop there. I appreciate I've talked a long time now, but obviously we're happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Members, I'll open up for any questions.
The first question, Mr Mayor, I think comes from Councillor Clive Jones.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a few questions. First of all, can I refer members on page 37 to paragraph 21, and that refers then to Council recognises it had some urgent capacity issues and progressed a review of its capacity across the organisation in early 20. And under paragraph 46 on page 42, first line reads, the Council needs to complete and update its capacity review that it started in early 20. At yesterday's audit committee, Mr Mayor, we discussed the corporate risk register under the capacity heading. Amongst those, it was referred to the, and I quote, the Council has many single points of dependency. And as chair of the audit committee, I've asked for the committee to be supplied with all the information about the SPODs. My question in this capacity area is, will the cost of easing the capacity situation in respect to SPODs be included in the RTI plan And does that depend on what the total cost of the RTI plan is?
Mr. Mayor, should I come in and answer that?
Yes, please. Thank you very much, Heather.
Okay, yeah, well, as we discussed yesterday, Councillor Jones, yes, we're in the process of costing the RTI plan outline investment. Obviously, that will have to go through a decision process, and there is going to be an affordability envelope in terms of what we can invest in. But obviously, there's going to be a triage in terms of against risk, underpinning the transformation of the organisation and improving service to the residents of Merthyr as well. So obviously, there's a lot of work to go through. But obviously, once we understand that total investment, obviously that will be shared with Council.
Thank you. My next question, Mr. Mayor, is on page 41. It's paragraph 38, and it refers then to the very last but when sentences. And I quote, "We also note that the summary of the RTI plan is not yet in the public domain. We would urge the Council to address this given the significance of the plan." Have we any idea when that's going into the public domain? And again, can I presume that that's dependent on the fact that we need to have costed this plan?
You're absolutely spot on, Councillor Jones. Obviously, we want to understand exactly what we're invested in before we actually provide the public-facing version. But I just want to point out, it's obviously it's got to be a living document anyway. Comms are actually looking at how we translate our internal accounts, to speak, so we say, to the public. But you're right, we need to understand which parts are being invested in first before we can communicate that to the public.
Thank you. The next question I got, Mr. Mayor, is in paragraph 45, which is on page 42, and it's the last sentences there, and I quote, it states, "In our view, the Council would also benefit from more transformation expertise, fresh perspectives and experience to drive this forward and ensure that the ethos of change and transformation permeates through the Council." My question is, do you believe that the transformation expertise and experience is already here within the Council, or does the Council need external transformation expertise or a combination of both?
Can I just clarify, is that question to me, Councillor Jones, or is that to Sarah Jane?
Well, it can be both. I mean, I need to have that explained from obviously the auditors, and hopefully someone like yourself can then explain where we can get this expertise.
Okay, ladies first.
Okay, thank you, Chair. In terms of that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not for us to tell the council exactly how to get that expertise. You know, it's about them determining, you know, whether they've got that or not. We have identified that we feel that is, that they do need to address that. So it's not for us to be explicit in that case. And we appreciate expertise come from different areas, with the council. So, it could be external, it could be internal. It's about maximising resources as well. So that's really a decision for the council to make. And also linked to that, obviously, we have said about the need for the permanent senior management arrangements as well.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Jones, from my perspective, or from an officer perspective, obviously we do welcome the recommendations because it actually complements what the council is already doing. As we've previously discussed in other forums, we know we have a deficit in certain skill sets, such as, for example, looking at a commercial agenda and looking at how we invest in the right skill sets for that. So that's a good example where we recognise that in order to underpin the transformation of the organisation, we know we need to invest in some additional skills that currently we don't have. Equally, we do have skills in other areas, but potentially we require further capacity. And that's what's all been identified in that RTI plan costing, in terms of, in order to get a panacea view in terms of everything we would like to invest in, but obviously it's got to come back to that affordability envelope and prioritise, obviously along with council views as well.
Okay, thank you. My next question is on page 44. It's paragraph 57. This is for the Wales Audit Office. It refers there to the fact that, I quote, "We are undertaking another financial sustainability review at each of the 22 councils in the spring of 2021. Through this, we will take a more detailed look at the council's financial position and medium-term financial planning. We anticipate publishing a report in April 2021. I just wanted to clarify, Mr. Mayor, this was referred to in yesterday's audit committee, but my understanding, I think from Erin Goddard, was that this report will be later in the year, because we are 3/4 of the way through April now.
Shall I update on that one? The timetable has slipped slightly, so we're hoping to issue the local reports and agree them with the council kind of towards the end of May, with the national report then coming later in June, July time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
And my last question, Mr. Mayor, is on page 46. It's in relation to paragraph 64. That's already been touched upon by Sarah Jane, and it refers to the fact that, quote, "The council needs to build on the constructive discussions it has had with the Education Consortium Central South to ensure that it has arrangements in place to make sure it is getting value for money from the consortium." Are these discussions going well, and are we getting value for money?
Shall I help to answer that? Is that okay, Sarah?
Yes, thank you, Leader.
Yeah, you're welcome. Clive, thank you for that. I think what we've seen, if I've got my Cabinet for Education hat on, what we've seen, Sue and I, is a complete turnaround from Central South Consortia since obviously the appointment of Clara. And on Friday at our assurance, when we go to the assurance board, yeah, it's on Friday, I thought I made dates wrong then, we're actually welcoming Nick, who chairs our Education Partnership Panel, but we're also welcoming Clara to come along and give an update as far as our relationship with Central South Consortia, and certainly the body of work over the period of the pandemic, as you can imagine, with distance learning, etc., blended learning, and all of that additional support we needed, especially with you know, some of our more challenging schools and some of those schools that we wanted to work more closely with. I can assure you that we have seen a turnaround. You know, I sit on the Central South Consortia board as well, and always ensuring that that is of paramount importance. And I know Councillor Harvey Jones has also questioned and brought that up in late skip scrutiny as well, and held Central South to account, really. So just to give you those reassurances, Clive, you know, and we will keep an eye on that as well. But I have to say, since Clara's appointment, she really has got her eye on the ball, and Sue will agree with me. I believe that Clara actually said in one meeting that if she fails at all, it's because she's failed Merthyr Tydfil. So, you know, we really have got somebody in the right seat supporting us there.
Thank you. That's very good to hear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor, your next question is from Councillor David Chaplin.
Councillor Chaplin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question's to the leader, and it's on page 39 under governance, and it says the Cabinet still does not have an up-to-date work programme, and to me it's getting a little bit like Groundhog Day, because the same subject has come up for practically the last 3 years on the Wales Audit Office report, and obviously leadership must come from the top to steer. So why, after 3 years, does the Cabinet still not have an up-to-date work programme?
Thank you, Councillor Chaplin. I can bring you right up to speed in relation to that. Obviously, as part of these recommendations, I have been involved as a Cabinet member, but obviously taking the reins as leadership in January, I really focused on my own performance and my Cabinet's performance, and together with my Cabinet, looked at this as a priority. So last month, I instigated with my policy officer a monthly Cabinet strategic meeting. In that strategic meeting, we work on the Cabinet work plan and the Cabinet forward plan. I'm pleased to say I have another meeting with Cabinet next Wednesday where this matter is due to be concluded. We've given officers until Friday because obviously I need those annual inputs from the officers, our lead officers, those annual inputs from the officers in order to build that plan going forward, and hopefully that will be available to you all ready to plan obviously your scrutiny work plans as well.
Okay, why hasn't that been done sooner? Was it a matter of a lack of leadership, or was somebody asleep at the wheel?
No, I certainly wouldn't want to comment in relation to any previous leader. What I will say is previous leader did have this in his work programme. We were working on it. It's just that it didn't come to fruition at that time. We were looking at other work plans from other local authorities to see what was working as far as best practice is concerned. And we found some failings in other local authorities as well, which we're now sharing across the board. But, you know, as I said, when I then took that up in January, Cabinet and I knew it was a priority, and I made it a priority, David.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Much appreciated.
You're welcome.
Glad, and I look forward to seeing the work programme. And will that be going to scrutiny? Yeah, now I need to double check. It will be going to scrutiny because obviously scrutiny can do their annual forward work plans then in relation to that. So that will help that. What it does do is it knits nicely into the development work that we're currently doing with scrutiny in general. As you know, I used to chair a scrutiny myself. So what I'm endeavouring to do with Cabinet is work on that with members. As you know, we've got another evaluation workshop coming up next week, so that it knits nicely into that as well, and will help those chairs of scrutiny to actually address their committee members and plan going forward. And as we've said, you know, to make Cabinet accountable as well, and to support call-ins, etc., and so that we can present reports to you accordingly. Okay, thank you, Lisa. My next and final question is on the Economic Recovery Board. I was pleased to be going on there in September. Initially, the meetings were going to be fortnightly, then they moved to monthly. But since I've been on it, lots of the meetings are being cancelled. The meeting in March, I went online half an hour before the meeting to check my emails to find out the meeting was cancelled that morning, and lots of the meetings have been cancelled. Is there any reason for this?
I think Alan will answer that one, David, if that's okay. Sorry.
Yeah, whoever.
Yeah, unfortunately, Councillor Chaplin, with the additional pressures and demands, with the fluctuation in the positivity rates across Cwm Taff and specifically in Merthyr Tydfil, then we encountered several emergencies which took a significant capacity, and obviously my capacity was totally thrown at that, as was some of my officers.
Thank you, Alan. That's my final question.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, your next question comes from Councillor Julian Amos.
Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two questions really, and it's related to the same point. Page 37, paragraph 20 about relationships. Two questions. I know Lisa's she's done a tremendous job since she took over in January, but bringing the groups together. But it says there, the interviewees talked of there being a great degree of trust. Can I just ask, and I obviously don't want names, but who were the consultees there? Who were the interviewees? Can the lady from the audit office enlighten me on that one? And the other question, which is, I suppose, related, is was any reason given for the improvement in all of our relations with officers and between each other?
Thank you, Mayor. I think my colleague Ian is going to take this. Thank you.
Hiya. Thanks, Councillor Amos. Yeah, I can give you some detail on who we were talking about there. We had meetings with cabinet, other member groups as well. Also Max Caller, who's mentioned in there, who'd been commissioned to do some work with both officers and members. I think really it was more a case of them coming together and having a sort of shared understanding of where the council was to go, and the dialogue between both the officer and member group was improved from how it had been viewed in the past. So it was largely positive. Some of it had been interrupted by COVID. Some things hadn't been able to go ahead as scheduled, but it felt like there was positive steps being taken and positive signs in the relationship developing, and sort of individual relationships being improved as well.
So when you say that's relationships between the cabinet and officers or members generally, or because the word that struck me was trust. That implies there was distrust before. That has improved now, is it? Recently, or the last few months, or something like that? Could you? Obviously, it's very heartening that there is a movement from trust and distrust. So it's just relaxed on that.
Primarily we're talking about between cabinet and the senior management team there, and wouldn't put an exact time scale on the improvement in trust, but I would say certainly predating the start of the pandemic, and then developing forward from there as well with the pressures of the pandemic as well, that there'd been a sort of mutual coming together, I suppose, and improved relationships in terms of responding. It wasn't necessarily distrust before, but just greater trust than perhaps had been in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, your next question is from Councillor Gareth Lewis.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 45 on page 42 of the report, it states the council would also benefit from more transformation expertise, fresh perspectives and experience to drive this forward. Can the cabinet member responsible for regeneration, transformation and commercialisation provide an update on the recruitment of a commercial manager for the organisation?
Yes, certainly, Councillor Lewis. Today in our Economic Recovery Board meeting, we discussed this with members of your group. Alan Owen gave us an update on the plan, and both myself and Councillor Andrew Barry will be meeting Alan Owen on Friday this week to take it further. But I can just say it's very imminent at the moment.
Thank you, Geraint. So, when you say imminent, does that mean we're going to begin the recruitment process quite soon?
At the moment, we're talking about the plan, what the ideal scenario and the ideal fit for this person would be. And from there, I would imagine Alan and his team, he'll come in here now to correct me if I'm wrong, will draw up the right prospectus and job description for the person.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thomas. What we touched upon today was the process to create a commercial capacity within the council. It will be subject to some service changes and some restructure, which obviously we've been considering for the last 3 months, and the decision today was the next Economic Recovery Board. It's all part of that group work programme. Will actually receive a report regarding the way forward. So literally within the next few weeks, Councillor.
Thanks for that, Geraint and Alan. I appreciate your comments there. I think it's vitally important that we do get the right person on board, because personally myself and I know other members share this, that the organisation, that the local authority hasn't perhaps benefited from commercial expertise in the past, and hopefully moving forward we can tap into to increase revenues through the commercial manager. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just remind everybody that we're still dealing with questions. So your next question is from Councillor David Hughes.
Thank you, Tavis. Can I ask, prior to 2017, was there ever a cabinet forward working plan? Someone can answer that, please.
Well, I can say very quickly that there were various processes to try and set one up, and that we had iterations of a work programme, but we never got to a formal work programme that I can recall, unless anybody else can tell me anything differently. So it doesn't sound as though we're able to be much more help than that, Councillor Hughes. So
no, thank you. I thought there must be one by the question that was asked, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we then have Councillor Tanya Skinner has indicated a question.
Councillor Skinner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just to ask a question on the commercial management question that came up, commercial manager question, sorry. And it was more in relation to communication, and I don't know whether Alan would be best placed or Geraint, but in terms of the last time we spoke in one of the workshops, Ellis gave us an update and explained some of the logistical things they had to consider when coming up with the commercial manager post. So when it came to starting to devise my work programme for scrutiny for the year ahead, the RTI plan is featured in most agenda items, and the commercialisation is one of those items. And as a result, one of the things I was hoping to look at was I should say we, the committee, we're hoping to look at the role of commercial manager and do a scrutiny function on some of the difficulties, on some of the expectations, and looking at it with that sort of critical eye, really. Now, obviously, in light of what's come out at this meeting, I wasn't aware that post was so imminent in terms of recruitment. So I suppose my question is, sorry it's been so long-winded, my question is it still something that would benefit through going through the scrutiny process, or are we going to be too late by the time it gets to us in scrutiny?
Okay, if I can pick that up, we also touched upon this in our Economic Recovery Board today, and it's essential that the logistical process we've gone through to identify what commerciality needs to look like, and commercial support and the creation of a commercial unit, not just a commercial manager, does go to scrutiny. And what you find on scrutiny and examination, Councillor Skinner, is it does touch upon many of the points which you led on in relation to contract management and contract analysis throughout the spend of the organisation.
Thank you, Alan.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure whether Councillor Geraint Thomas has got a question for us or whether he was going to answer that question.
Yeah, it's not a question. It is part of the answer that Alan was giving, and it's something that perhaps Alan can take up for us as well, is if we can offer a place on the Economic Recovery Board to the member of the group, so either Tanya or Julian can sit on there as well. Alan, is that possible?
Yeah, I'd be happy to discuss that when myself and Councillor Barry meet tomorrow, as you've indicated, Councillor Thomas. Yes, more than happy to consider that.
Mr. Mayor, then I think if Councillor Skinner is able to put her hand down, unless she's got another question. Have you got another question, Councillor Skinner?
It was just to say that I would be in support of that, Carys, and I'll contact Alan separately tomorrow about that.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, then I have nobody else indicating to ask any questions.
Members, the leader want to speak?
I think perhaps you need to go on to see if
observations.
Sorry, it's been a bad day so far. Members, as there's no more questions or indicated, can we go on to any comments, please?
So
I can see Councillor Skinner.
So it was Councillor Chaplin first, and then Councillor.
Councillor Chaplin.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just moving back to, I was obviously deeply concerned that for the last 3 years there's been no cabinet work programme. On the bottom of page 40 of this report, it says the council's leadership's aspiration now needs to be matched with action, and that's what I agree. You know, actions speak louder than words, and never a truer word has been said than the council leadership aspiration now needs to be matched with action, and that's my comment. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Skinner was next to indicate.
Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to say that it was really reassuring to read the report, particularly in terms of HR. I noticed that I think it was item 46, they talked about an external advisor from Welsh Government being implemented, along with the other measures, of course, which again is really reassuring. The RTI, as mentioned previously, the RTI has been a fundamental part of my planning processes when I started looking at the work programme for next year. So, and HR was already on our agenda to come back to scrutiny. So it'll be really good to look at it through a slightly different lens and with more clarity and more focus. So if I could just refer, just on items 67 and 68 on page 46, it mentions about the need for, to make sure that we're continuing to look at and evaluate the progress that's made on both the dashboard and other measures that are being implemented. And I'm sure my colleagues on the committee would join me in welcoming this, and also to make sure that it features in our scrutiny programme throughout the year to map progress, and so that it's not sort of fallen by the wayside or not kept an eye on. Particularly in terms of working closely with this external advisor, that would also be something I would be interested in from a scrutiny perspective. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Julian Amos.
Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'd just like to say we've come a long way, because last year, let's face it, we were looking quite bad, and over this year we've come quite a long way. I don't really think I can let the opportunity go without mentioning our staff, because what's been achieved would have been quite an achievement in normal circumstances, but with having to cope with the storms and more particularly the pandemic. I think they've done a tremendous job in supporting the council. We've always been thankful for our staff and heavily dependent on them, but this year in particular, I think they've stepped up to the plate. And also, from my own personal experience, since Councillor Skinner and I formed our own, telephone kiosk group, my experience has been that the leader has done a fantastic job of bringing together the councillors and the elected members. She keeps work. I don't know about Councillor Roberts. I don't know, but she certainly keeps in touch and has regular monthly meetings with me. And in that sense, she had done a good job of uniting the council. So I think the future is rosy, as they say.
Mr. Mayor, I think next to indicate was Councillor Chris Davis.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mountain Officer. Obviously, Audit Wales team, can we welcome your work, your engagement, your positive comments and recommendations, and thank you for coming to Council this evening. I think it's fair to say that from a Cabinet perspective, from my perspective as the Deputy Leader, we had great engagement with you on early doors of obviously the drafting of your report, and a lot of the work that you've listed in your 10 recommendations was absolutely work in progress for us. I don't think there was any surprises for us, certainly as a Cabinet. The work that Councillor Barry's touched upon in terms of the medium-term financial plan, about prudent financial management, about the aspiration of being a sustainable organisation, although that's against the backdrop of that being a real struggle for any public sector organisation, including organisations like our regulators, Audit Wales, CAW and Estin. We're all in the same boat, but the aspiration is absolutely there to work smarter, not harder, to maximise on the funds that we have to ensure we get the best outcomes for our residents. The work around governance in the organisation, you'll see from the RTI plan, the work about scrutiny, ensuring that is a vehicle that's fit for purpose, as you have said, holding the executive to account. We're going to embark upon some exciting work about making our constitution fit for purpose, and ensuring that that is a document that serves this council well, but more importantly, serves democracy and the people that we represent in this county borough as well. We've talked about the work of the RTI, you've seen that. The work on the report that's come in later on this evening on our well-being plan, focus on the future, the raising aspirations, raising standards, strategy, all things that set this council in good stead. Councillor Jones touched upon the capacity and obviously the work of the audit committee around SPODs, obviously strengthening that. We've done some excellent stuff, and I can speak from my own portfolio as social services. We've permanently appointed a fantastic head of children's services. We've got so many aspirational plans for this authority. Recently, on the back of some CAW recommendations, we've strengthened the capacity within adult services and the appointment of a principal manager who is going to be taking a post in June. Council supported some months ago peripatetic, a different way of supporting families to remain living together, peripatetic support workers to strengthen the capacity at the front line within children's services. Corporate management team and cabinet have supported some temporary posts, social work posts in adult mental health. We have appointed a safeguarding coordinator in the MASH, someone who's brought some real mental health experience into that team. So for me, really, really fantastic stuff. The support of the Assurance Board, particularly in social services, and the support of the Welsh Government has been fantastic. Our work that Councillor Barry's led on performance, on focus on my performance, and how we embed that into the organisation to look at continuous, improvement. I wanted to respond particularly on partnership working, because it's a thing that I particularly led during COVID, the response of third and community sector organisations to the pandemic, of supporting our communities, and the work of residents themselves and elected members has been second to none. We've been really highly commended across Wales for our work. I've recently taken up, I'm in week 4 of being the new chair of the Cwmtaf Maganog Regional Partnership Board. I've met recently with the new chair of the PSB, really looking to strengthen our relationships there as we embark upon needing to set a new population needs assessment and wellbeing needs assessment, and how we join up the work of those two very key strategic partnerships across the region. Mass testing, vaccinations, the work we've done with the Health Board has been absolutely out of this world with the Leisure Trust. I think we are all in this together. This isn't just about holding the cabinet to account. This is about holding the whole council and officers to account. We're all 32 currently, 33 members of this authority. We're all in this together. It's not about the cabinet this, the cabinet that. Absolutely, we are the executive, but we're all in this to be all held to account to the residents that we are elected to represent. I wanted to echo what Councillor Amos had said about this. None of this would have been achieved without the hard work of our ICE and DICE, our interim chief executive and deputy interim chief executive. Thanks of all of our staff. But we've got to work at this over the next year and future years to secure the best outcomes for the residents of the county borough. But that ultimately doesn't only rest with Cabinet, it rests with all the elected members of this council. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, your next indicated to speak is Councillor Darren Roberts.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Moderating Officer. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Couple of comments from myself, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, because I know we've given this a good airing, good debate this evening. The first one is I'd like to point out that I'm not sure of the date, it was either 2015 or 2016, that there was actually a portfolio created for transformational change, and Councillor Linda Matthews at the time was the portfolio member for that portfolio, and a very good job she did at it too. I mean, there was a lot of changes made and quite a lot of savings and different attitudes in working created moving forward. That post, unfortunately, wasn't carried forward in 2017, but now we've got a transformation portfolio this year. So just like to make that point. And if I can make members direct members to page 41 and specifically item 39 of the Audit Wales report. And it says the political balance of the council is now more fragile than when we issued our letter in May 2019. Following the recent suspension of the leader, there are currently 15 members of the main independent group, 15 members of the Labour group, and 2 independent councillors. The council has moved swiftly to appoint a new leader, but the balance is such that there is a risk that could impede the council's ability to take difficult decisions. Political fragility could mean it is harder to progress budget discussions and plans, and it is therefore more important for there to be strong governance, clear communication arrangements between the executive and the opposition members. I would like to disagree with the first part of that comment, and it's picking up really on what Julian, Councillor Amos mentioned. I'd like to thank the leader really, because there's been a far better communication since she's been in post, and we have had some very meaningful discussions between the leader, the deputy leader, and myself and the deputy leader of the opposition. And I think the evidence of that is the budget setting and council tax setting, which took place quite recently. So I agree with the last part of the statement, saying that it is important for governance arrangements to be between the executive and the opposition members, but I really got to disagree with the first part of that statement. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Mr Mayor, next you have Councillor Geraint Thomas.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just say I welcome the report from Welsh Audit. I think we are well on the way to transform this council, but you know we've got to be realists, and it shows exactly where we are. And I think hopefully when we have a report next year, you know, again we'll be a long way along that road to turn this council into a 21st century authority.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just need to point out to Councillor Skinner, having already spoken in the debate, you won't be able to speak again, so it would be helpful if you could take your hand down for me, please. And then Councillor Gareth Lewis has indicated to speak next, Mr Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's important to remember that this report is not the work of Welsh Government, nor the views of the Labour group. It is a detailed and constructive appraisal of the progress being made in addressing key concerns by an independent regulatory public body. And whilst progress has been made, improvements do clearly need to follow. Concerns remain in governance, capacity, and local authorities' medium to long-term financial resilience. I do look forward to seeing how the local authority continues to address these important issues in the coming months and indeed years.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis.
The only person then left indicating to speak is the leader, and if the leader speaks now, that will close the debate. So I'll hand that over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thank you to everybody for your comments and your observations. As many have already alluded to, work is already underway in relation to addressing these recommendations. And of course, this is supported, as it's within our within the report, supported by our RTI plan as well. But of course, working closely with the Assurance Board as well, WAO and Welsh Government, and of course others. Whilst we can't fail to recognise that despite there being a great deal of work still to be undertaken, as Sarah mentioned quite early on, we must remember that this council and its officers, in the face of a pandemic and of course one of the worst storms on records, our officers kept their eye on the ball, keeping all those plates spinning, as one of my cabinet colleagues reminded me today, and endeavoured to do their day job as well as all of the additional pressures put on them in the last 12 months. And for that, they really must be commended. Yes, there are still areas of weakness, but there are also a lot of strengths as well in Merthyr Tydfil. And not forgetting that despite us being the smallest local authority, the true guts and determination shown by all in getting on with the job, working with partners, etc., was recognised by Welsh Government and other parties for the way in which we've been dealing with the pandemic and, of course, a mass testing. Leadership has been mentioned by several colleagues, and as leader of this council with my cabinet, I can give assurance that we will continue to work on this report to support our strategic aims, our plans, our aspirations, and we'll do that daily as we have been doing, and we will get the job done. There are many positives to also be proud of, and the challenges we face will only make us stronger and more resilient. And of course, there is always an opportunity to learn, and we are all learning as we progress. Engagement is imperative. Engagement with all councillors, chairs of scrutiny, and of course our officers is of paramount importance. Nobody wants Merthyr Tydfil to fail, and we won't. It's simple as that. We simply will not allow us to fail. We will work together, and I know that by working together we will address these recommendations. So thank you once again to all of my colleagues, all of our officers, and last but not least, can I give thanks to Sarah, Helen and Ian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Can we now, as there are no comments, closed, can I ask the moderating officer to put it to the vote, please?
Yes, so Mr. Mayor, if I can ask that all members who wish to abstain on this item, please show now. Thank you. All members who wish to vote against this recommendation, please show now. Thank you. And all those in favour, please show now. And that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, members. We'll go on to item number 5, the statement of well-being and the focus on the future. And I'll ask the leader to address the council, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, as you know, we've already mentioned some of these particular strategies. Sorry?
Should come back now.
Oh, sorry, there's somebody talking. I do apologise, Mr. Mayor. Can everybody mute their mics, please, if you're not talking? I think we've got some new councillors in the future joining some of our full council meetings, and I love it. Maybe we should do a session for our young people as well. Apologies, Mr. Mayor. Let me go back to what I was saying. Yesterday we had a workshop regarding our corporate plan, and of course discussing our strategies as well this evening. So, summary of the report in relation to this agenda item, which is the statement of wellbeing and focus on the future, wellbeing in our community. I'll run through that with you. Prior to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015, the Council produced a corporate plan and aligned this to Regional Single Integrated Plan, the SIP, The Wellbeing of Future Generations Act changed this to focus on the Wales that we want, which emphasised, as we all know, 7 wellbeing goals that have been passed by Welsh Government into legislation. At 1.2, together with this, the Act states that in ways in which we should work to achieve the goals, for example, sustainable development and principle, these are known as the 5 ways of working, for example, long-term preventative involvement, integration and collaboration. To embed this change, Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council's shared vision document makes the connections from the 7 national wellbeing goals through to our own local wellbeing objectives and priorities. The corporate wellbeing plan has been developed year on year, and as a result, lessons learned. Over the years, we've become more focused on our 4 wellbeing learning themes and objectives, namely best start to life, working life, living well, and our environmental wellbeing. This has helped us to remove some of the naturally occurring silos, whilst also sharpening governance arrangements. Our statement of wellbeing reaffirms our 4 local wellbeing objectives for the community over a 5-year period, 2017 to 2022. In other words, this is why we are now doing what's been set out in the focus on the future plan. The focus on the future plan goes into the detail of how and what we will do to achieve our wellbeing objectives. In readiness for the 4-year implementation, there has been no evidence to indicate that there is a need to change or amend the 4 themes and corresponding wellbeing objectives. To ensure, however, the consideration is given to how the council tackle poverty in all service areas and to positively respond to feedback received during scrutiny meetings, last year we integrated the Tackling Poverty strategy into the corporate wellbeing plan. Obviously, this was a point identified as a barrier in the workshops conducted by Audit Wales as part of their work test in progress against the working life, skills and employment and best start, flying start themes between 2017 and 2019. So this theme has remained in the plan this year as we build on the work done. At 1.6, this year we've integrated our RTI plan into the corporate wellbeing plan, and our RTI plan focuses on 3 areas that we need to address to better deliver our wellbeing objectives. These 3 priorities, just to remind everybody, are of course improving our education standards, increasing our resilience in social care and our economic recovery. Getting our RTI plan right will ensure that we can better deliver our corporate plan, which we discussed with many members who attended the workshop yesterday. And therefore, colleagues and Mr Mayor, I would go to 2.1 and make the recommendations that the statement of wellbeing and focus on the future wellbeing in our community documents be approved by Council, and I so move.
Thank you very much. Have we got a seconder for that, please?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'm absolutely delighted to second the recommendations, and in doing so just wanted to endorse everything that the leader has said in terms of the summing up of this excellent report around statement of wellbeing, focus on future wellbeing in our communities, and in doing so just put on record the council's cabinet's thanks, and actually our community's thanks to our officers, led by the head of governance, the scrutiny and performance officers who've done a huge amount of work actually behind the scenes on pulling this excellent piece of work that shapes actually the future direction, aligns so well with our RTI, all singing and chiming together just to get the best outcomes in terms of, as the leader said, the 5 ways of working around well-being of future generations. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Members, any questions?
Yes, Councillor Chris Davis, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Monitoring Officer. Obviously, in commending, this excellent piece of work, the report this evening talks about the significant efforts around engagement with councillors and scrutiny members. But I just wanted to ask, really, the head of governance, if he's here, or the chief executive or deputy chief executive, what is our next steps now for the remainder of the plan and future plans about wider partner and organisation engagement in this, and also the wider continued involvement of the wider community and our residents in this important piece of work. It's great that we can own it, but obviously the community need to get on board with this and the future iteration of shaping this work moving forward, based on what I said earlier about needing to align the Regional Partnership Board and the Public Service Board in terms of the population needs assessment, wellbeing needs assessment. There are great opportunities for us with this plan moving forward to ensure that wider stakeholder engagement from partner agencies who we work so well with, but our wider community as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. You spot on, really. You've answered that question in the fact that, yes, we do want to, as we've done previously, link the work that we've done across CUMTAF in terms of the needs and population assessment into the work that we do in, and develop that further engagement with councillors in our workshops as part of rolling out the new Act, the Local Government and Elections Act.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you much. Members, any more questions?
No, Mr. Mayor, there's nobody indicating.
Thank you. Members, any comments?
Councillor Chris Davis and then Councillor Darren Roberts.
Councillor Davis?
Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to give way to Councillor Roberts if he wants to come in first. That's fine.
Councillor Roberts?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chris. I think this report is an excellent report. The report authors are Ellis Cooper and Andrew Mogford, but as Councillor Mitten and Councillor Davis have said, there's a lot more work gone into this by other officers as well. It shows the aspiration of the local authority, and I think that coming out of COVID and the need for well-being, especially around mental health and other well-being points like fitness, are going to be crucial. So I really do welcome this report, and thank you to all involved that's put it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Davis?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Embedding the 5 ways of working, in terms of compliance with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is so important to us, and that's why I asked the question about obviously the need to strengthen that engagement. We can write as many strategies and policies as we want and put them on our website, and they can go on our shelves gathering dust. They've absolutely got to be owned by the community, and absolutely concur with Councillor Roberts' comments about mental health, emotional well-being for all ages. And also some of the concerns I've met with the local health board over the last couple of weeks in my new role as chair of RPB around some of the key worries that colleagues in the Merthyr and Cynon integrated locality group have got. One of those things that's come to light is around childhood obesity, and it's something we all need to work together, local authorities, Public Health Wales and the health board, with education, sports development colleagues to take forward. I think the integration of the focus on the future and its alignment with the RTI plan is absolutely integral. That they're almost like pieces of jigsaw puzzle that come together to paint that absolute picture. Self-evaluation is important to this improvement journey, and workshops have been rolling out over the last couple of weeks, looking at self-evaluation and that continuous improvement around this. But that engagement, that wider involvement with the community moving forward in this to shape the future, get people on board, get people engaged, get people included, is absolutely integral. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Davis. I'd like to hand over to the monitoring officer to take the vote, please.
Yes, so members, can I ask you please, if you wish to abstain on this item, can you please show now? Thank you. Any member wishing to vote against this recommendation, please show now. Thank you. Any member voting in favour of this recommendation, please show now. Can we just be certain that everybody has voted? Thank you. Mr. Mayor, that is carried.
Thank you, Moderator Officer. We go on to item 6 and item 7, which are information reports. Item 8 to go to any urgent business. Item 9.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, can I stop you there in relation to item 8, and if you may indulge me with regards to some business for all members very quickly.
Certainly, sorry, certainly.
Thank you. Colleagues, I hope you will indulge me for taking over the meeting for a couple of minutes. I would just like to give thanks and appreciation to the Mayor, Councillor Howard Barrett. As I'm sure you're aware, it was remiss of me, I'd actually forgotten because I remembered the AGM in May, but this is Councillor Barrett's last meeting as Mayor of Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council, and so it's his last meeting as chairing full council, even though he will of course be partly chairing the AGM. Colleagues, I just wanted to give thanks to Howard for his service because, of course, in these unprecedented times, we had to extend his mayoral term as well. And so he took this chair on for far longer than I think perhaps he thought originally. Colleagues, I just wanted to thank the Mayor, Councillor Howard Barrett, for all his work in chairing full council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, there are other people indicating to speak. I'm not sure whether they are speaking on the same issue as the leader. So if I ask Councillor David Hughes, first of all, if he can just clarify if that's what he wanted to comment about.
Councillor Hughes.
Yes, Gareth, that's what I was going to say, but the leader said it much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. And I think the other person indicating to speak is Councillor Clive Tovey.
I think it must be a legacy hand. Sorry about that.
There we are. Thank you very much. Then I think, Mr. Mayor, that will deal with that issue, unless anybody else is going to indicate to speak. No, and then, Mr. Mayor, I think you're then on to item number 9.
Yep, we're going to item 9 to receive any communications received by His Worship the Mayor. I think I'd thank the leader. I'd like to thank you all for all the help and the understanding to my mistakes through the last couple of years. I thoroughly enjoyed the position, and I please consider that position to carry on for many, many years, which is a tremendous and honour to represent with the Tydfil Council and to represent you at full council. Thank you very much, and I wish Councillor Colburn all the best for the future. Thank you very much. Thank you all. One more important thing. I did do a slight error, well, a couple of slight errors tonight, which is normal for me. I forgot to thank Wales Audit for attending the meeting and ask them to leave quietly. But thank you very much. Thank you all much. Thank you.
Well done, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.